Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading The House of 60 Fathers, and I'm going to begin chapter 4. Chapter 3 was all about Tien Pao and walking through the mountain and his fear of the mountain spirits and trying to protect his pig from being eaten by all the hungry people. This chapter is called The River Cliff, and it starts with a picture of a soldier. But I couldn't tell what kind of soldier this was. So then I looked ahead in the chapter and I saw this picture and I thought, I think he's going to run into some Japanese soldiers. And then I read ahead and I found this picture and I thought, well, maybe some American soldiers as well. The River Cliff. Steadily through the night, water trickled into the cave. It backed up behind the wall of leaves Tien Pao had plastered in the opening. The water seeping over the cold rock on which they were lying distressed Glory the Republic, that's his pig. He snuffled unhappily and nudged Tien Pao. Then Tien Pao did not stir from his exhausted sleep. The little pig climbed onto his chest to get out of the wet. He rolled off the moment he fell asleep. He rolled through the wall of leaves into the open, and he immediately began eating the leaves. Light filtering through the opening at last roused Tien Pao. He sat up in alarm. He was soaked through and through, chilled to the bone, his teeth chattering. He cautiously poked his head out of the little cave. Dawn was glimmering in the sky. It shimmered in the river. But that was the river. He'd not lost the river after all. It had been there all the time, but its soft rustling had been drowned out last night by the heavy rumble he'd heard in the valley. When he could keep his teeth from chattering, Tien Pao heard it again, the same steady, unending rumble of the night before. He crept stiffly from the cave and looked into the lightening sky. It looked as if it was going to be a bright, clear day. Whatever it was down there below, there was no time to lose if there was to find another cave to hide in before full sunlight burst over the mountains. They couldn't stay in this watery hole. They'd freeze or drown. Tien Pao had difficulty holding his shivering body still while he looked about to size up the situation. The little cave into which he had blundered last night was in the side of a towering cliff that rose like a poking finger, tall and solitary, into the sky. A narrow path corkscrewed past the cave and up the steep back of the cliff. The path must lead on through the mountains, and somewhere along it must certainly be some little cave for hiding a dry little cave. A dry little cave, Tien Pao hoped fervently on the sunny side of the cliff, he added to his hope. He shivered and flexed his stiff and aching body. The rumble down below came strong to his ears. It worried him. He hastily undid the rope to give the little pig full freedom to find a cave. Then they hurried up the cliff. Day was dawning. They climbed higher and higher up the tall cliff. As they climbed, they searched. Glory the Republic dug and snuffled. Tien Pao poked into every likely-looking crevice. There seemed to be no other cave in this sharp, solitary cliff. They hurried on up. They rounded a turn in the twisting path. It proved to be the last turn. Tien Pao and Glory of the Republic were on top of the peak. The dome top was smooth and bald like the old head of a man. There was nothing on the rounded dome but lone, thorn, bush, and a huge boulder worn smooth and polished. Tien Pao looked at it in dismay. The high peak was nothing but a lookout point. The path had led to nothing but the big boulder, polished and worn by generations that had come up here to sit and look down at the valley and the river. The rumble in the valley beat up against the lone cliff. Morning sunlight reflected off the polished boulder. Full daylight. There was no time to lose. In full sunshine, they'd have to rush all the way down the cliff, climb up a further mountain, and then still find a cave to hide in. Unless there might be a cave somewhere on the river side of the peak. Tien Pao hurried over the dome to the thorn bush for a quick look. What he saw below made him gasp. The high cliff jutted out over the river. Straight underneath glistened the water. But across the river, in the deep river valley, was a road. From that road came the endless rumble. Huge trucks were grinding down that road, bumper to bumper. Dust clouds rolled up behind the trucks. Now, into the dust of the trucks came a troop of galloping horses. Soldiers with rifles sat straight and proud on the backs of the horses. Behind these mounted troops came horses pulling cannon, 6 horses to a cannon. The Japanese were on the move. They were going the same way he was going, toward Hanyang. As the stunned Tien Pao stood looking down on the scene from behind the thorn bush, the men on the cannon all of a sudden began whipping their horses. The troop of horsemen leaned over the necks of their horses and thundered on into the dust behind the trucks. The trucks rolled faster. The grinding of the trucks whined up against the cliff. The Japanese soldiers were looking up. They twisted their necks and looked up into the sky, and the air over the river was so clear and bright it looked almost as if they were staring right at Tien Pao on top of the cliff. Tien Pao, too, twisted his neck and looked up into the sky behind him. There in the morning sky, a speck appeared. It was like the speck of a hawk makes when he sails over the yard of a farmer where chickens are pecking the straw. But it wasn't a high speck anymore. It was a swift, high airplane, and now it fell screaming out of the sky toward the trucks and the horses. Down below, the trucks were not riding packed together anymore. They were strung out along the road. Horsemen had tumbled off their horses and lay along the road, their rifles pointing to the sky. But the men on the cannon still came on. They leaned far out. They lashed their horses on. All in one screaming moment, the airplane was above the road and along the road, low now, big and snarling. Then it happened, as it happened at Tien Pao's village. This airplane too came with a horrible stuttering screech of bullets, but this was not against a peaceful Chinese village and helpless sampans. This was against the Japanese. Some of the trucks stopped. Some of the drivers threw themselves into the rice paddies along the road. Some of the trucks rolled on into the hail of bullets and explosions. A truck turned over, its wheels thrashing the air like the many feet of a great clumsy bug. A truck burst into flames and stopped. The truck behind crashed into it with the sound of thunder. The driver pitched through the glass into the flames of the truck ahead. In flashing swiftness, the airplane and its hail of bullets were beyond the trucks. The plane came back. It zigzagged from one side of the road to the other to catch the horses and men running into the fields. The awful, unearthly scream of horses rent the air and beat against the cliff. Tien Pao dug his fingers into his ears, but it was as if the screaming went on inside him. His skin went tight with horror, but he kept looking. He couldn't tear his eyes away. Men fell, horses fell. Men tumbled off cannon, and the cannon went over them behind the madly plunging horses. Horses broke loose from their traces and reared and floundered in the deep, muddy ooze of the rice paddies. One, wounded and maddened, thrashed over the bank into the river and sank from sight. The river turned red where the horse had gone under. But not all the men who lay along the road lay still. Some raised rifles and fired at the low sweeping plane. Bullets smacked into it, and once the plane jerked queerly as if it stumbled in the air. But it rose the way a great wounded bird swoops up, shaking itself. Higher it climbed, higher, in a straight zooming upward line toward a peaceful cloud bank drifting over the river. Before the plane could reach the cloud bank, a black mass of smoke belched out of it. For a moment, it was hidden from Chow Pin's sight in its own black smoke, but only for a moment. The next moment, the plane came falling through the smoke, down toward the river and the road. Tien Pao squeezed his eyes shut. He trembled. He could not bear to see the helpless plane spinning and whistling down to the earth. His fists clenched and unclenched. Then a new sound came to Tien Pao's ears, the sound of a motor coughing. When he opened his eyes, the airplane had somehow straightened out of its helpless dive. It was going down, but it spun no longer. Somehow it found the road. Somehow it leaped and bumped down into the road, bounced along it with the swiftness of light. It stopped too soon. It stopped too short. Its tail flew up and flipped over. There lay the plane on its helpless back. A roaring mass of yellow flames gushed out of it. On top of the cliff, Tien Pao could not breathe. There lay the flaming plane. No one could be alive in that. But out of the flames, a man came tumbling. His clothes were on fire. He tumbled and rolled away from the plane, and he beat at his clothes with his bare hands. He jumped up and ripped off the aviator's helmet that was smoldering at the back of his neck and beat at the flames with that. But was that the airman? Was it the yellow-haired airman that he had rowed across the river? His river god? Tien Pao could not believe it. With his eyes riveted on the man, he talked to Gloria the Republic about it. Short, little unbelieving words. It couldn't be. Oh, it couldn't be. He had seen only one airman. Maybe all Americans had yellow hair. It must be that. In the valley, the Japanese had started running. They jumped up from everywhere and ran toward the distant burning plane. The airman crouched in the bushes, still beating at his smoldering clothes. Run, run! Tien Pao wanted to shout, run! Oh, but he must not shout. He dared not shout. As if the yellow-haired airman had heard the shout Tien Pao had shouted, he suddenly backed away into the bushes. The first two Japanese came racing down the road toward him. They did not know anything alive had come out of those flames. In the bushes, a pistol gleamed. It spat, and again. The two Japanese fell on the open road, but others were coming, and the white soldier knew it. For now he broke from the bushes and ran toward the river. But he was too slow. He must run faster, faster. Then Tien Pao saw that he dragged his leg. Now he stopped. He clung to a bamboo clump for support. Now he limped off again in his crouching run. He did not run straight. He kept clumps of bushes and bamboo between him and the Japanese. Now he started on the last short sprint to the riverbank. Two Japanese came around a bamboo clump. The white soldier threw himself flat. Then his pistol barked. One Japanese fell, but the other crawled on, hidden by the bamboo. And as he crawled, he held his pistol ready, but he did not shoot. By that, Tien Pao knew that the Japanese were trying to take the airman alive. And he remembered what his mother had told him. If they caught him, they would torture him, bamboo splinters under his fingernails. The crawling torture pain stabbed into Tien Pao's fingers again, the way they had done when he'd sat before his mother on the bench in the sampan. There was nothing he could do for the airman, nothing. But the airman had known about the second Japanese. There was a shot. The Japanese let slip his hold in the bamboo clump and sagged. The airman turned to dive into the river. It was a trick. It was a trick. Didn't the airman know? Didn't he see? The Japanese was coming around the bamboo in one bounding leap, clearing the space between him and the airman on the bank. Before he realized what he was doing, Tien Pao was screaming out, "Look out! Look out!" It was Chinese, but it was a warning scream, and that the airman understood. He whirled, he shot, it was all in one motion, but this time the Japanese crumbled, and this time it was no trick. And now the airman slid over the bank and into the river. From the high cliff, Tien Pao saw him swimming underwater. He angled off with the current toward a big branch floating down the middle of the river. The current took him away, and then he was gone from sight. Just the branch floated downriver. The Japanese had also heard Tien Pao's screams. From across the river, up-pointed rifles searched the cliff. A rifle spat. The shot shattered a branch of the thorn bush above Tien Pao's head. Tien Pao shook in terror. Somehow he kept himself from running. One thing he had learned from the airman, he did not run in terror. Instead, he threw himself flat and lay still as death behind the bush. He pressed Glory of the Republic down beside him, but he couldn't keep himself from staring in fascinated horror through the branches of the bush at the up-pointed searching rifles. It couldn't be believed. He could clearly see the riflemen with their cheeks laid over the rifles, searching, aiming, searching for him, aiming for him, to kill him. It couldn't be believed. Tien Pao had to fight off panic, had to fight to keep from running headlong over the cliff and down the path. He must keep down. He mustn't move, and if he moved, he mustn't raise himself at all, but crawl, slow, slow, slow. That was what the airman had done. Slow now, keep down, crawl. Slowly, Tien Pao twisted his face away from the riverbank and the rifles. He studied the path up which he had come. Slow now, slow. Slide flat, inch ahead. Holding Glory of the Republic down by the front leg so he couldn't possibly rear up. Tien Pao slithered face down toward the path up which he had come. He dragged the little pig inch by inch beside him. Glory of the Republic. You mustn't squirm. No, Glory, no. We're going to stop there and we will continue this the next time. At last, we're seeing some war action. I was beginning to wonder if Tien Pao was going to be just hiking in the mountains, trying to avoid people for the whole show, the whole book. So we hope that he makes it down safely and that the Japanese don't see him or the white airman. We'll find out in the next section. Bye-bye.